How can your business stand out from competition? And how can you position your brand in the industry? What are the strategies to do so? Companies should have a different offering and products or services from the competitors. A successful method to stand out is carving out a unique position in the marketplace. Welcome to my 6th digital marketing lesson, and today we are talking about brand positioning. We will see what brand positioning means. I'll show you 2 types of methodology, and at the end I'll explain you the strategies to communicate brand positioning. A prerequirement of brand positioning is having a clear and deep understanding of consumers' wants and needs. So I suggest you to watch my previous video where I talk about market segmentation. I will put in the description below the link to this video. In fact, your business should first analyze the market and discover the groups of consumers that can serve best. Then you should build a positioning strategy and place your brand into the industry in a way that everyone can recognize its specific offering and image. By the way, what does brand positioning mean? So it is a designing process that enables companies to outline their offerings and image and occupy a specific and distinctive place in the minds of their target audience. In other words, we can also say that brand positioning defines consumers' perception of a company and its brand. A good brand positioning should be concrete enough to reflect the actual and present situation of a business, but also visionary enough to leave room for growing. So it should represent the perfect balance between what the company is and what it can be. Marketing and management of Kotler and Keller has identified 3 requirements for successful brand positioning. The first step is deciding a frame of reference by determining the target audience and relevant competitors. Then, given a frame of reference, identifying similarities and differences with other brands. The third step is making a compelling motto to enclose the brand's essence. And don't worry if you don't understand these points now, I will explain them later. You can eventually use the table of contents in the description of the video to navigate it and reach the section that you are interested in. So what I've just explained you is one first type of brand positioning, and it is more analytical. It requires a deep understanding of your target audience, but there are also other alternatives, and one is a brand positioning based on narrative or storytelling. This approach doesn't really require an in-depth analysis of consumer competition and your company, but in my opinion it doesn't suit every business, and now we are going to see why. In May 2009, Business Week issued the Selling by Storytelling by Ronald Grover, who said that brand positioning is a result of a nailed storytelling rather than an outline of specific attributes and benefits. Instead, in a breakthrough approach to brand creation, Randall Ringer, CEO and founder of Verse Group, now part of MBLM, and Michael Thibodeau or Thibodeau, I don't know how to pronounce it, a brand strategist and creative director, have discovered 5 key aspects of brand storytelling. So they basically say that one first pillar is represented by words and metaphors which wave the tail. The second is how consumer interacts with the brand over time, how the brand represents people, objects and places, and its language, the bond between brand and sensorial experience, brand engagement level with people's heart, so basically how the story interacts with the consumer's feelings. Finally, the last point is represented by the role played by the brand in consumer's life. Basing on these 5 factors, these 2 gentlemen developed also the narrative branding framework, which is made by the setting, time, place and context, the cast. The brand becomes a character with its own history, the creation myth, and relationship with or responsibility towards the audience. Then there is the narrative arc, how events unfold in the story, and the language, the brand's authentic voice, its symbols, metaphors, and leitmotifs. In this video, I will not deep further this brand positioning approach because I'm a digital marketer and I don't feel being the best person to analyze and explain you narrative storytelling and language use. Above all, because narrative branding requires a deep knowledge of the language and the culture of the target audience. So once you have understood the guidelines that I've already explained, I think that it changes according to the specific population that you are targeting. So now let's dive into the analytic brand positioning approach. The first step to craft brand positioning is identifying a competitive frame of reference. Defining a competitive frame of reference means that you select the rivals to compete with. For example, AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint spent billions of dollars to build their network. But over time, the development of Wi-Fi and hotspots allowed Skype to break through, and they actually didn't expect it. Once you have selected the rivals with which you want to compete, you should analyze the perception of their strengths and weaknesses. One of the easiest methods to do so is interviewing their customers. This image represents an example of a poll where clients expressed their preferences on three competitors. If we analyze this positioning table, you clearly understand that your company can attack competitor A on product availability and technical assistance, competitor C on almost everything, but you shouldn't engage competitor B, which has no main weaknesses. In your industry, competitors are usually more than what you think. For example, Coca-Cola was so focused on its soft drink products that missed the growing market of coffee and fresh fruit juice bars, which negatively affected its business. In 2000, the textbook E-Commerce by Jeffrey Rapport and Bernard Jaworski suggested to profile direct and indirect rivals by mapping buyer steps in obtaining and using a product or a service. Once you have identified, select, and analyze your primary competitors, you should also try to think of their strategies and objectives. What is each competitor seeking in the marketplace? What drives its behavior? To help you doing this analysis, you can get from the link in the description below my digital marketing template to rate competitors' online success key factors. So just go on my landing page, submit your information, and then you will be able to make a copy on Google Spreadsheet. And don't worry, all the instructions are inside. Now it's time to identify the difference from rivals. Every company should determine its points of difference or PODs, which are unique characteristics that consumers recognize only in that company. And there are three criteria to make strong and positive associations. The first one is based on the desirability. The brand associations must be personally relevant to consumers. They have to believe in the brand's promise, or in other words, in the delivery of the desired benefit. The second criterion for better associations is deliverable by the company, which means organizations must have the necessary internal capabilities to maintain the brand associations in consumers' minds over time. These points of difference must be highlighted by product or service design and marketing offering. For example, does the product or service deliver the right message, or it needs real changes? If the product or service is fine, should consumers receive a different message to align their perception with the brand's points of difference? The final criterion is differentiating from competitors. Consumers must associate the brand with unique and greater characteristics compared to its rivals. Now that we have identified the PODs, it's time for the POPs, the points of parities, or in other words, the similarities with other competitors. They are attributes that a company has in common with its rivals. And this point is very important because you don't need also having differentiating points or attributes, but you also need to have shared associations or characteristics with the competition. or the industry. So the brand must have similarities with the product or service category in order to be perceived as credible and legitimate. For example, to recognize a travel agency as such, you need to see that they are able to book flights and hotels, give leisure advice, and providing different tickets pricing options. A business should have also points of parity with its competition for two important reasons. Every similarity invalidates a competitor's point of difference. You understand? Because if you have a characteristic in common, it's not a differentiating point anymore. The second is a shared association negates a perceived vulnerability of the brand. And it happens when consumers focus on a strong differentiating characteristic and think that if the business is good at one thing, it is not good in anything else. So a good strategy to master similarities is to put competitors' shoes, catch their points of difference, and eventually emulate them. Points of parity and points of difference are many, and marketers can't work with them all at once. So they have to select them to position the brand. One tool to support them in this activity is the brand positioning map. Brand positioning maps visualize consumers' perceptions and preferences. They represent a specific market situation and describe how people see a product or a service according to different parameters. This is an example of a perceptual map or brand positioning map, you can call it in both ways. It visualizes clothing brands according to consumers' perception of design and price. So to make this representation, I picked two dimensions. Price, so the more a brand is placed in the right side of the x-axis, the more expensive it is. The second dimension is design trend, so the more a brand is placed in the upper part of the y-axis, the more its design is traditional. Accordingly, the more it's located in the lower side of the y-axis, the more its style is trendy and juvenile. You can try to make a brand positioning map by yourself using relevant dimensions for your business. Another critical element to position a brand is its brand mantra. It should be a short phrase, 3 to 5 words long, that captures the essence and the spirit of a brand. Scott Bedbury, an American branding consultant, in A New Brand World said, "Brand mantra is an articulation of the heart and soul of the brand, and is closely related to other branding concepts like brand essence and core brand promise." The brand mantra is very useful for employees and partners to adjust their communication and match it with the company's brand positioning. So it is very different from the slogan or the brand payoff because it aims at the inner part of an organization. In the blog article related to this video, I inserted some examples to clarify this concept, so I suggest you to read it. I put its link in the description below. So well, how can you design a brand mantra? According to Kotler and Keller, a good brand mantra should condense the operating business and the unique value proposition. It should be short. Memorable mantras are fresh and lively in meaning. Marketers usually design mantras with the differentiating characteristics that make the business unique. Now that we have this great lookout of brand positioning, it's time to understand how to communicate it. Communicating brand positioning means letting consumers know the industry where a company competes, its point of parity and difference. One way to do so is reassuring the consumers on the benefits expected after using a product or service. They can be benefits based on the performance, for example, the great taste of a cookie and its high quality ingredients. Or they can be benefits or results based on imagery, for example, the delighted image of consumers while they're eating this cookie. This scheme can help marketers visualize their brand during this process. And if you look at the image, a brand can offer more or less benefits compared to the competition, and it can even decide to provide more benefits for a lower price. So the ball's on you, marketers, to pick the strategy which best fits your company. Another communication technique is accosting your brand to industry leaders. For example, Tommy Hilfiger advertised itself as a member of a US designers elite by associating its brands with more popular and well-established ones like Geoffrey Bean, Stanley Blacker, Calvin Klein, and Perry Ellis. It exploited their brand reputation to grow and carve a place among them. The third popular method to communicate the brand positioning is relying on the product descriptor. Zora Quino's branding dictionary defines a product descriptor as a functional brand name that automatically enables the main quality or application of a product or service to be identified. Tends to be useful in lesser known markets where the public, searching for brands, will first encounter those with a generic denomination. And I couldn't explain it better. Marketers can rely on the product descriptor to let consumers understand the positioning at a glance. In 2004, Ford invested more than $1 billion to make a car which combines characteristics of an SUV and a station wagon. This model went down in history as the Freestyle, and Ford communicated its unique position, establishing a new category called sports wagon. Brand positioning hides many challenges for marketers because they will inevitably face the difficulty to communicate the point of parity and difference. For example, if you try to communicate the high qualities of a product or service and then you also state that it is inexpensive, you create a disruption in consumers' minds. Or long-lived brands can exploit the myth of their history or creation, but it may trigger a backlash. Consumers can perceive them as old-fashioned or not up to date. As you can see from this table, attributes and benefits have often negative and positive associations. A possible strategy to overcome these continued trade-offs is addressing consumers with distinct marketing campaigns and reveal points of parity and points of difference one by one. In my professional experience, the most common mistakes in brand positioning are underpositioning, when a brand is not able to understand consumers' perception and doesn't unleash its full potential. Overpositioning, a brand's position doesn't match the value attributed by consumers. Confused positioning, when people don't understand the brand's message or communication and can't confer it a value. And impossible positioning. The best way to explain this point is with an example. Let's say that McDonald's won't suddenly change its positioning and be perceived as a healthy and high quality bistro. There is no way it's gonna happen. This is an impossible brand positioning. Well, we have reached the end of this lesson. And now I have a deal for you. Use the comments below to describe in a few words your brand positioning, and be sure to insert the link to your website. I will tell you if your online communication and message match your brand positioning. Thank you for watching. Every week I come up with a digital marketing lesson, so be sure to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification. Like this video and see you soon!